Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of What's New in Prisma. I'm Nicholas from the Prisma team, and with me is my fellow Prismate Daniel. How are you doing
How's
today,
it going? Doing very well. How are you doing, Niko?
I'm also doing really well. We don't live too far apart actually in Berlin, and I was wondering, did you see the rainbow that was here just half an hour ago or so when the rain shower was there? Did you see it?
I missed it actually. I was out earlier for lunch, but no, I didn't catch the
All right.
rainbow.
Yeah, I should drop a picture on our Slack. It was really really beautiful and really huge. Anyways, today we have a really nice stream with a lot of things that we are going to talk about and that we're going to see. So first and foremost, of course, as usual, we'll discuss the release from Tuesday and the new features that have been released there. And we'll have Matt from our product team on to give a demo of how to run Prisma client inside of Cloudflare workers, which is really exciting, I think. And then we'll also talk about the upcoming Next.js conference, where you and Mahmoud are both going to give talks. And we'll talk a little bit about that and what you're speaking about. And then we'll interview our new documentation lead, Tana, that we just hired actually a week ago. I think it was her first week here at Prisma. So we'll hear a little bit about her and what she's planning in her time at Prisma. But I think we can go and jump right in. So I'm going to go ahead and, as usual, share my screen so that we can walk over the release notes and highlight all the relevant parts there. So let me do that. Share
and today
screen.
we're discussing the 3.3.0 release. So we've got 2 threes, and I think we've got a lot of really nice stuff. I mean, I've been excited about Cloudflare functions, Cloudflare workers for a while, and it's super, super exciting to see this finally landing.
Absolutely. Name tags are rearranged. Okay, there you go. All right, yeah, as Daniel just mentioned, we are talking about the 3.3 release today. And the biggest feature, I think, is the Prisma data proxy support that we now have opened for everyone. So before this release, before Tuesday, we required people to go through a type form, to leave some information, and then we would invite them to the private early access program of the Prisma data proxy. But this is now not necessary anymore. So if you want to try this out, so if you have a use case where you're running Prisma inside of a serverless function and you connect to a traditional database such as Postgres or MySQL, then the Prisma data proxy might come in handy because it takes care of connection pooling for you, which really is an issue if you're working in serverless environments with traditional databases. So that's one thing about the Prisma data proxy. And the second thing is that it's now also possible to run Prisma client inside of Cloudflare workers also using the data proxy. And in fact, we'll see a demo of how this works by our fellow colleague, Matt, in just a bit. Then there were a few new releases for MongoDB. So MongoDB, as of now, is still in preview. We do support it. You can already use it, but we recommend that you're not using it in production just yet. However, we're, of course, always looking for feedback. So if you're using MongoDB and you're just curious to learn how it works with Prisma, then we definitely encourage you to try it out and share your feedback with us. A new feature for the MongoDB preview that we released on Tuesday is that you can now order a returned list from a find many query by a relation field. So if you have posts and authors and you would like to have the posts ordered by the emails of the authors or the names of the authors, then you can do this. We now have this added piece to in our Prisma client API. We also now have MongoDB 5 being supported. There is one small change that maybe a few of you ran into that related to timestamp columns on MySQL. So if you're using MySQL and you know that you're using timestamp columns, then it might be worth for you to look into this a little bit further. This is the relevant GitHub issue where all the information is outlined. In case you weren't aware, we're planning to broaden the support for Prisma Client and bring it to other programming languages. And in fact, we have the first kind of experiment of that already running, and that's Prisma Client in Golang, where we also are trying to get feedback from you all. So if you are using Go, if you're playing around with it in your free time, or you know Go developers that are desperately looking for a new ORM to work with their database, definitely point them to Prisma as well and ask them to try it out. And in the Go client, we now also expanded the API surface and added scalar list operations, which of course already have been available in the JavaScript and TypeScript client, but now this is also available in Prisma Client Go. All right, that was the overview of the 3.3 release. And I think at this point, we can already go ahead and bring on Matt to the stage, who is going to join us and talk about Cloudflare workers.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Niko.
Let's quickly rearrange the name tags here. All right, there you go. All right, Matt, you have been working on this feature, I think, for quite a while, and it's really exciting. Maybe you can just give a very quick summary of what exactly it is that we have released there on Tuesday, and then you can also go and jump into the demo if you like.
Sure. So on Tuesday, we released Cloudflare Worker support, as Niko mentioned, and it was a big release for us because so for the longest time with the Prisma client, we have this query engine, which is a Rust binary that is living right inside your node modules when you install Prisma. And we actually, that doesn't work in the Cloudflare Worker environment because Cloudflare Workers runs JavaScript. It doesn't run a Node.js API, so you can't do like require FS or any of these things. And we depended on a lot of that stuff to communicate with the Rust query engine internally. And so we needed basically the node runtime to work with the local query engine. So what we did was we now moved with the data proxy that Prisma supports. That's actually been moved to a server. And so now we actually can talk to the query engine over HTTPS.
Right. So the query engine that was like previously contained in the node modules, it's now moving over to the data proxy, and the communication between the Prisma client and the data proxy then is via HTTP.
That's exactly right. Yep.
All right. Nice.
And then we were able to basically remove node essentially from the picture inside your generated Prisma client, and that's really great because now also your serverless functions will be a lot smaller because we don't have this additional binary we're shipping with your serverless functions. So it should be a net win overall.
Yeah, so the bundle size of this also has been reduced, which is very nice.
And I guess the reduced bundled size is worth emphasizing that applies both to Node.js and Cloudflare workers. So for example, if you're using Node.js serverless functions, AWS, wherever you are deploying it, Vercel 2, if you are using the data proxy and you generate the Prisma client for that, for use with the data proxy, you actually don't include the binary, which makes it much smaller, which also means that those serverless functions load time is much shorter.
That's right.
Nice.
Yep.
All right, Matt, are you ready to give us a sneak peek of how that works?
Yeah, I'm. So I just want to give a caveat. This is hot off the presses. In fact, one of our product managers messaged me this morning saying some of the UI has actually just changed on me. So we're going to give this a shot and see how it goes, and we'll work through it if there's any problems. Yeah, let's give it a go. I'll go ahead and share my screen.
And for folks that are curious about the workflow that Matt is going to show, we actually also just published a guide in the Prisma docs that explains exactly the workflow that Matt is going to show now. And I dropped it in the comments. So if you're keen on trying this out yourself, you can just go to that docs page and follow the guide there.
Yep, that's right. So I'm sharing my screen. I'm actually just going to run through this documentation with you today. Can everybody see? Is it too small? Maybe I should bump it up a bit, I suppose.
All right, that should work, I think. Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so I'll just kind of run through. So this guide is about deploying to Cloudflare workers. And what you'll need is a MongoDB Atlas database with an accessible URL. They're free to set up the first one, so I've got one set up here. And you'll need a Cloudflare worker account, obviously GitHub, Node, and Git installed.
Right. One quick side note here, Matt. I think the reason why we're using MongoDB in this context is also to show like even that it's now possible to communicate with MongoDB from Cloudflare workers, which I think is not even possible with any other library today. So this is also in general just a huge benefit that people get if they're using MongoDB and Cloudflare in the first place. But it should probably be noted that MongoDB is only used as an example in this case, and this would also work with a relational database.
Yeah, that's a great point, Niko. So one of the interesting things about Cloudflare workers is that it only works with HTTP at the moment. So all of your traditional databases, the way you connect is over TCP. And so for Mongo, Postgres, MySQL, that's all through TCP. So you actually can't directly connect to one of these traditional databases within a Cloudflare worker. And with Prisma, with the data proxy, that's actually possible now, as Niko mentioned. And yeah, we're just using Mongo as an example. It could be Postgres or MySQL as well. Anything that, and it has to be hosted. That's the one, I guess, constraint. You need to be able to access it with a URL. Yeah, let's run through this. So I'm going to create a new folder. So we're actually going to start from scratch. We're not going to create any templates or anything, or build off any templates. Going to initialize Node. And I'm going to install some dependencies. I need to actually add Webpack here. That's part of a PR. We haven't quite merged to this documentation yet. So if we were pre-recording
this Cloudflare CLI, right? This is the main CLI that you use to interact and deploy things to Cloudflare workers.
Yeah, that's right. So this is like the official Cloudflare worker CLI. They call it Wrangler. And then we're going to initialize Wrangler. So what we have right now is node modules, this wrangler.toml file, and our package.json. And then you want to log in. So I'm already logged in, but the next step would be to log in, and it kind of opens up a browser window that you can just kind of authenticate with OAuth. And then you can verify that you're authenticated with npx wrangler. Who am I? I've already done all that, so I'm going to skip over that. Next, we're going to be using TypeScript for this demo, and so I'll just quickly set up a TypeScript config.json. Actually, I'm going to jump into code at this point. It's a bit more convenient. 1 second. Okay, pull this up. And yeah, I'm sorry for flipping the apps, but it's a bit to copy and paste here. We'll just pull in this TypeScript config, and then we'll install the types that we need, and also TS loader, which is needed for Webpack. And one thing to note here is you need to pin actually this TS loader to a specific version. By default, it is 9, and for some reason Cloudflare workers Wrangler, the way it's set up, doesn't quite work with the latest TS loader. There's an issue here to kind of resolve that. I'm sure that like maybe even by the time we're recording this will be fixed, who knows, but for now we know this one works.
Right.
So, and one of the cool things about Wrangler, actually, Cloudflare Workers CLI, is that it has built-in Webpack support. So it just like kind of like you just create a Webpack config, config.js, and you can copy this kind of boilerplatey configuration here. And then you would want to actually point. There's a way to point. So it already by default, when you initialize it, it says, let's use Webpack. And then it's like Webpack config. Well, actually, 1 second. Let me pull up the PR because we fixed this recently and it's not in the latest. Yeah, it's okay. So it's like this actually, Webpack config. And so this just tells it, okay, we're going to use this Webpack config instead of the default one. And I guess a couple interesting things about this one. Obviously, we're going to be filling in the worker inside source index.ts. We want to target web workers. Web workers is a more isolated environment than, like, it doesn't have the DOM in it, and it doesn't have the Node.js APIs, so it's a good environment for Cloudflare workers. We need to set up this alias. This actually might go away at some point, but right now, if you just import Prisma client without doing this inside your Cloudflare worker, it will default to the browser or the Node.js version of it, and so this just like fixes that. And then the last thing we've got set up here is using the TS loader, so we can use TypeScript, and it will get compiled to JavaScript when you actually build the web worker. So then it's we can set up Prisma now. So let's initialize Prisma. And one thing, so what we're building today, I probably should have mentioned this at the outset, is we want to build a worker that just like logs to. You can imagine you've got a page and you just want to add analytics to it or log HTTP requests so you can see how much traffic you're getting. That's kind of what we're working towards today. And so I'm going to copy and paste this Prisma schema in here. And we're adding a log model, and that log model has a level, a message, and any sort of metadata you want to add. And the other two things to note are that we are enabling the MongoDB preview feature, and we are enabling the data proxy early access feature. Cool. Yeah. So now we want to actually create a repo. So we're going to actually start to link this to the cloud. And so I'll go ahead and create a private repo. And I'm going to name it Prisma MongoDB Cloudflare. I'm not sure if I have this yet. Okay, I do. I'm going to go. Okay. Yeah, I'll switch the order around. You can switch it as much as you want. I'll make it private.
All right, so you'll show us also the UI of the Prisma data platform, right? So for
that's right.
I'm haven't seen that yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to
be tying it all through. It's yeah. So set this up. Yeah, then we'll just kind of initialize everything. Create a repo. Tie it to our. So I changed this. MongoDB, and also fix the username. So we've added the remote, then we're just going to add everything and make the initial commit, and then push it on up.
Looks good.
Cool. So just reloading GitHub here. Now I'm demoing GitHub, I guess. Hey, it works. Cool. Yeah. So now we've got some accessible point, like the GitHub repository can now be read by the cloud. And so now I'm going to go ahead and open up Prisma Data Platform account. And as you can see, I have a bunch of these. I'll just go ahead and create a new project. If you're starting this for the first time, you'll need to sign up, but don't worry, it's free. And you'll press maybe a slightly different button, but you'll eventually end up at this configure project screen. And yeah, let me run through this. So I'm actually going to import a Prisma repository, and I'm going to call this Prisma Cloudflare MongoDB, and I'm gonna then pull in my project that I just created. This is a lot faster now, which is awesome. I have quite a few repos, so it usually took like a very long time. But now it seems like the team has sped this up, which is cool.
Right. Initially, I also had the problem with this view that it didn't paginate, and I also have more than 100 repos from all of my examples and demos, and I couldn't get to the one that I actually needed. But then it was fixed very quickly as well.
Awesome. Yeah, they're on their toes here. Okay, cool. So now we're at I've configured. So I've linked my GitHub repository to Prisma Cloud, and now I'm going to actually use my own database here. And this is where I'll pull in the credentials from Atlas. And so the way to do that, this is a demo account, so you can actually go ahead and use this. I'll delete this right after. So if you'd like to, you feel free. We'll connect here. Again, this is all free to set up to get started with. So you don't need to put your credit card in or anything. Yeah, and then I'll name this. So this part is the database name. I'll name this logs, and password is admin, everybody. And then yeah, we'll enable the data proxy. So this is actually really streamlined. This skips a couple steps that I had before, which is awesome. So create the project, and we'll get this this connection use string to the data proxy actually. So what we'll do now is we'll take this and we'll put this in here. And so what this is doing is we're connecting through this data proxy that manages the connection, the number of connections for you. And so it allows you basically from your Cloudflare worker, you'll connect through the Prisma data proxy with this URL, and that will connect to your Mongo Atlas database. And so the as you know with deploying to serverless is that every single request spawns up a new worker, and so can be hundreds of workers potentially, and this is kind of filters everything through this data proxy, which efficiently manages the connections. And so maybe it's 100 workers that are all communicating with this data proxy over HTTPS, but then there's only maybe, I don't know, 10 or 20 connections to the actual database over TCP, if that makes sense. Okay, so we've set up that, and we're actually, so this is old already, even though I made this documentation 2 days ago. That's how fast the Prisma team, it works. So we're skipping over this, and yeah, so now we are ready to generate a Prisma client to be used within the Cloudflare worker. And so this is the command to do that. This basically says, hey, build the version that doesn't use Node.js. Build the version that's ready for data proxy. And so we'll run.
So that's an environment variable that you're setting for this command, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
You can also set it in here as well. I think it goes in engine, maybe in this one actually, and engine type data proxy. We don't recommend that because oftentimes you'll use the data proxy in production, but the local binary in development. And so this is kind of like a better way. You can put this in your maybe an nvrc file or something like that and kind of swap it on depending on what environment you're going into. So so we'll generate a Prisma client specifically for this Cloudflare worker now. Okay.
And if the people who are watching have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat so that we can address them later.
Yeah. And now, okay, so we've got all that set up, and so now we're actually ready to develop our Cloudflare worker functions. So if you recall, I had the entry point be in source index.ts, and so I'll create a source index.ts file. And I'll just copy and paste this in. This is typically what this would be your application logic. Yeah, there's a bit of a weird thing with TypeScript and the tsconfig in this. Okay, so now it kind of figured it out. It's Cloudflare Workers does some kind of, or like at least the way that Cloudflare documents this, they've kind of had this trick where it's like they use this types thing, and this kind of, I guess, allows for like global types to be introduced. And so you've got like this, I think this request is from, it's like, it would be like Cloudflare dot request or something, but the way they've set this up is kind of, it's kind of magical. So, but there ends up being kind of a dependency between this and this, and you may need to like refresh or save this again to get everything picked up. Cool. And so we've got our Cloudflare worker here. It basically just every time you go to a URL they provide, it will run this request. And what this request does is it creates a new log entry in Prisma log with info and like the request method, gives it a get request, post request, and then the URL that was requested, and then it logs any headers, and then it will respond. The Cloudflare worker will respond with what the request method was. So let's then see if this works locally. So we'll run npx wrangler dev. Okay. And if all works well, we will, awesome. So what happened was, there's a lot of moving pieces here. So Prisma, the Prisma client connected to the data proxy over this URL that we've just set up, and that is talking to our actual MongoDB Atlas database. And so this is working in development. The other cool thing about Wrangler is it won't let you do like require FS or anything like that. So like you kind of know that this environment, it works in Cloudflare workers as well. So that is looking good. Let's then, yeah, I guess we can maybe skip that, and I'll show you that in a sec. So let's try actually publishing this thing. So npx wrangler publish. I love how fast this is. It's amazing.
And so what's really amazing now that you've deployed this, it's like deployed to many, many data centers all across the world. I think at this point I've seen a map. So really they have across the world multiple instances that are serving these worker runtimes. And I guess the main benefit for this is that users will get this in the region closest to them. I mean, of course, you still have the challenge that your database is sitting in one location, so there's still that distance to travel from wherever the worker runs. But it's quite amazing because if all of us call this endpoint now, this workers dev endpoint, we'll each get it in a region close to us.
Yep, that's right. And then if 100 people call this endpoint, you won't take the database down because we're using the data proxy. Cool. So I've hit refresh a couple times, loaded this up, and so what I'll do now, just to kind of round the whole circle, is I'll jump into MongoDB Compass, and actually I think it just creates it on the fly, which is cool. So this is connected to this MongoDB Atlas page database, and so then I'll just jump into here and just see, hey, we've got like all of this. These logs now, and these are get requests, and you'll notice actually makes the browser makes two requests. It makes one for the favicon and then one for just the URL directly, and so that's yeah.
One quick question out of curiosity, actually, can you now also see the data inside the data browser in your project in the Prisma data platform, or is that not yet supported for Mongo?
That is a good question. I have not tried that, so we can give that a go and see if that does work. And actually, it looks like all goes. Hey, it works. That's awesome.
All right.
So maybe we don't need to use Compass. Yeah.
Matt, could you zoom in a little bit?
Sure.
All right. Cool. I actually hadn't seen the new design of the data browser with all the tabs on the left side. I only saw it when it was all on top still. That looks neat.
And so we had someone in the comments, Huvik, raised a really good point. He said this is not a good idea to log logs like that in Cloudflare workers. And I think that maybe the logging example is not the best example to sort of showcase the value of using Cloudflare workers. But maybe we can sort of expand on that, because I sort of agree with him. You probably want to have a dedicated solution for logging, and you don't want to start storing all of your logs in a database. Do you have any thoughts on this, Matt?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. You could, I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with putting it in a worker per se, but yeah, putting it in just like directly putting in the database may not make sense. You may want to, I don't know, push it to like Firehose or something like that, and have or one of these these solutions that is designed for log data, time series data, and that will auto scale without you needing to manage anything. There's quite a few of them, and yeah, this is just for demo purposes.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting this in production.
Yeah, so to be fair, I think when you like come up with these rather like demos where you want to show something end to end, I think it's okay to have a little bit of a contrived example, but it's great that we're pointing this out, and thanks for the comment, Huvik.
Before we wrap up, Matt, I think it's worth at this point, because this is quite revolutionary. I mean, even just the idea of Cloudflare workers. Do you want to sort of expand a little bit on why would you even bother with Cloudflare workers? Because obviously Cloudflare workers, as we saw, it doesn't support the full Node.js API. But sort of this is like the one downside that you get. And on the other hand, you get a lot more benefits. And I think one of them is the cold starts. Do you want to touch a little bit on that and some of the existing challenges with serverless?
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth talking about. The main one you mentioned is the cold starts. There is no cold starts with it. It's just always running. And there's a really interesting talk from the technical creator of Cloudflare workers that I would highly recommend people checking out. It kind of gives you the why, like why didn't they just use containers instead of why did they decide to use V8? Like with containers, it's more flexible and stuff like that. Well, you get a bunch of things with by hosting V8 that you wouldn't, which is what Cloudflare Workers is actually using, that you wouldn't get with containers. And it's like a lot faster. There's no cold starts. I think the economics work a lot better. So it's a lot cheaper to run these things as well. And so like Lambda's pretty cheap, like $1 million that's free, and then after that it rises from there. But like I think Cloudflare workers, I'm not sure exactly their pricing, but I think it's actually more economical to run those. So in general, if you can make your functions work inside the V8 environment without Node.js, it has to be written in JavaScript or I guess Wasm, you should try to do it. It's going to be faster than running them in Lambdas.
And I think a good analogy for this is sort of the transition that we've seen from virtual machines. These were really big until Docker came along. And essentially what Docker offered is with containers, essentially it's a much lighter weight virtualization layer. And so I think, it's a sort of good analogy because, Node.js can be quite heavy to get started. You have to run essentially like a container. And now you don't even need to run this container. It's really using this technique called V8 isolates, which gives you sort of isolation and still allows you to sort of, have your own code running.
Yeah, and one other, I guess, one note on that that's I just kind of an interesting thing is normally you shouldn't trust like some random VM running your code, like two separate customers running like two separate workloads, but because just the sheer amount of usage of V8, just using in the browser, isolating scripts from each other, isolating tabs from each other, and it's just like it's a really proven virtual machine at this point to isolate workloads from each other. And so it kind of like normally you shouldn't trust it, but in this case, because it just has so much usage like around the world through all these technologies, like it's trustworthy, I guess, which I think is interesting.
Thank you, Matt. That was great.
All right. I don't think we have any additional questions in the comments, except for one maybe that's quickly worth addressing. I don't know if we have anything to say about this. Since MongoDB is NoSQL, is there a chance to get it working with Firebase Firestone? I can't really speak to that. Do you have any thoughts on this, Matt?
I'm actually not sure either. So I haven't looked at Firestone. Is it MongoDB wire compatible?
No, I'm pretty sure it's its own thing. I think it also uses its own sort of HTTP protocol for it. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so nerd versus nerd versus machine. If you want to see this, then as usual, open up a feature request, and then we can look into it and see if it's somehow possible to support. All right, I think we can let you go now, Matt. Thank you so much for the demo, and thanks again. Cheers.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, guys.
Bye, Matt.
All right, Cloudflare workers. Very nice. Oh, arranging. Okay, I think we got it.
Yeah.
All right, next topic on the agenda that I think we can discuss now is the talks that we're going to give at Next.js Conf next week. And then we'll wrap up by interviewing Tana, our new documentation lead. But to speak about the two talks, so first, the conference that we're talking about here is Next.js Conf, which is going to happen on October 26th. So that is next, is it Tuesday actually?
I believe so, yes.
It's on Tuesday. I'll drop the link to the full link to the conference in the comments. And yeah, you're going to give a talk and Mahmoud is going to give a talk. So we'll have two Prisma talks there. And before we start talking about your talk, Daniel, I actually prepared snippets from both yours and Mahmoud's talks that we can quickly play here as a teaser. So let's look at what Mahmoud has prepared for us.
There are many ways to make money online. And one way is to sell your knowledge. Maybe you have deep expertise in a certain topic, or you just have a unique perspective. So you decide, you know what, I'm gonna write a book, film a video course, or do both. Then you go to a course hosting platform and you upload your content, and then you start selling. Now, this approach works. However, as developers, we always get this urge of wanting to build our own solutions. This is me acting on this urge. Now, to not fall into the trap of building my own course platform and never releasing my course, I give myself a deadline, one weekend to build the following features. Users should be able to view free content on my website. This way, they can be familiar with my style and know what to expect with every piece of content that I publish. They can also see the landing page for my course, click buy, which redirects them to a checkout page where they can enter their credit card info. They can then use the same email that they used during checkout to log in into the platform and to view protected content.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a good cliffhanger for everybody to look forward to Mahmoud's talk there. And I see he's also in the comments. So if you have questions, then maybe drop them there and he can respond. But I think it's going to be really exciting. So he's basically going to show you how he's building these features that he outlined with Next.js, with Prisma, with Stripe. So really a lot of really relevant technologies there that he's putting together into a kind of real world application. And I'm really looking forward to that course and that talk.
Yeah, likewise.
Daniel, you also have a talk, and before we start talking about it, maybe I can also quickly play your intro to the talk.
All right. Imagine that you could build the Next.js app with a database without having to worry about writing SQL, scaling, or managing infrastructure. What would that look like? I hope that today's talk can give you a glimpse into the future of databases in serverless made easy. I'm Daniel from the Prisma team. But first, let me begin with how we got here. Over a year ago, we launched Prisma Client to general availability, a next-generation ORM for Node.js and TypeScript that helps you build faster and make fewer errors when working with databases. Since then, we've heard from thousands of developers about how Prisma is helping them build and evolve their data-intensive apps rapidly. Today, There are more than 40,000 Prisma developers, many of whom using it with Next.js. And this is no surprise. While Next.js makes app development fun and easy, Prisma makes databases fun and easy to use.
Nice. Yeah, I think that was already a great overview, but maybe you can also quickly summarize what exactly your talk is going to be about.
Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, I think that Next.js, it's already been established, it's being used, I think, even by Apple, Washington Post. It really gives you the best-in-class developer experience. However, we've looked a bit at Cloudflare workers just now and saw some of the challenges of working with relational databases and traditional databases in serverless environments. And so I think we're at this really critical point for the ecosystem where, databases are now becoming easy with Prisma. So, we're taking a lot of the lessons in the success of Next.js with developer experience. We're applying the same principles at Prisma to, the database layer. And so I think the future is really exciting, both in terms of like the technological development of Prisma, of Next.js, and also things like Cloudflare workers and the edge. And all of these things sort of coming together, I think they're going to create a wave of really good tooling to build applications. And it's going to be really exciting to see, what people are going to be building with this, because I think it's just going to empower more developers to build, these top-notch apps that we're seeing.
Nice. Yeah, so the conference is next Tuesday, and hopefully all of you watching right now are going to tune in then as well. All right, yeah, that's a nice comment. Prismas for databases, what Next.js is for. What was it, React? Yeah.
For React, yes.
Yeah. All right. I think with that, we come to our last point on today's agenda, and that is the interview with our brand new documentation lead that I'm going to pull up on the stage now. That is Tana. Hey, Tana, so great to see you here.
Hi, thanks for having me. And you make me feel all shiny and new. Thanks.
Yeah, it's still your first week at Prisma, right? Your first day was last Friday, actually.
Last Friday.
Mid-October. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Tana. So you're joining us as a documentation lead here to make sure that our docs are properly taken care of. But maybe you could just start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to a position of a documentation lead at all.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, it's a long story. I've been doing docs for decades, literally. I'll blame my brother. He got me a Commodore 64 when I was a teenager, and the magic of hooking that, the CPU was in the keyboard, and hooking that up to the family television, stealing my sister's music cassette player to store the programming on, and it actually working was so amazing that it just hooked me. So
it's like technology, an early version of IoT and smart home.
Yeah, exactly. Only you all would laugh to see the television. It was as big as a smart car. Yeah, so I just got hooked on technology and have been doing tech docs for quite a while now. In all sorts of companies, a lot of, IBM, BMC Software, large companies, tiny startups where the CEO was programming beside me madly all night while the six of us are trying to get a release out. So done a lot of different companies. I started out with databases, actually, with database administration tools, distributed, and even some mainframe. Yeah, I actually started writing before really there was a UI, before the internet, really. It was sort of green screen, command line helps. I'm a command line junkie. So yeah, and I come from a family of scientists. We love data. We love the idea that there is so much data and that you can search for it and you can manipulate it and you can massage it and you can analyze it. And it's just anything to do with data is quite fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious to talk to you again in 6 months and hear where Prisma kind of fits in on that scale of companies that you've seen, from IBM to small startups, where we are kind of in the middle. But well, I mean, we don't really feel like a corporation yet, and I hope that we are going to retain this for a long time.
I think this is a lovely spot. This sort of middle of the maturity phase is a really lovely spot where the passion is still there. It's not too process heavy. There's a chance to define some processes that are great. It's a really nice phase of a company to be in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Tana. So why did you actually decide to join us here at Prisma?
Oh, I love that question. I hope no one will be surprised to know that technical writers, just like developers, they look first at the product when they're considering a job. Is that product cool? Because nobody wants to spend 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day writing or coding about a boring product. So the fact that the product is super cool is one of the big reasons. Another reason was one of my first conversations with the VP of product at Prisma, Hervé. He just casually said, as if everyone knew, docs are part of the product. And I was like, oh, I want to be part of this team that respects the fact that docs are a critical part in pre-sales and post-sales, of course, all the way through. Docs are part of the product and incredibly important for developer happiness, for user happiness. And then I would say also that the strength of the open source community here at Magento, I had a lovely opportunity to work with a very strong open source community. And that really hooked me on open source and the strength of the community. Even in the documentation, we had tremendous interaction with our community in the docs repo. And it seems the same as here at Prisma. So I'm quite excited about that. Yeah, and databases. So lots of reasons to be at Prisma, lots of cool people, fun technology.
Yeah, I can totally subscribe to the point of docs being kind of a first class citizen here at Prisma, and they have been since kind of day one, actually. So that was always something that we just considered to be part of the developer experience, right? It has to kind of complement the tooling, and it has to reveal the right information at the right time while not overwhelming users when they're just starting out. So a number of challenges that we've always tried to address from the very beginning in the documentation. And yeah, I'm super happy to have you on board and take all of this to the next level.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, think about it, even Matt, when he was doing his demo just now, he had the docs up beside the code. That was lovely, right? To just follow through the flow, and that was really fantastic to see.
Exactly. Yeah. Finally, what are you specifically excited, Tana, that might happen at Prisma in the next couple of months?
Yeah, I think number one is learning the product, really learning the product and being able to write authentically about it. And yes, of course, I will be on the side writing, Matt and Alberto and everyone saying, okay, but why does it work this way? And how exactly does it work? But learning the product deeply enough to be able to understand how to architect the docs, how to write sentences that are technically authentic, how to understand the use cases. Why are people using this? How are they wanting to use it? When should they maybe not use it? All of those considerations, really learning the product before being able to write authentically about it is super important. So that's something I'm excited about. I'm already in the platform, got a couple of repos set up. And Niko, I have to say, when you said 100+ repos, I thought I had a hard time of it. 100 repos. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, to be fair, the majority of these are just little examples, which I had to create over the past 4.5 years. But yeah, so not really substantial code in there.
Right. I would say the other thing I'm excited about is doing some information architecture. I am very interested in how to architect docs so that people quickly find what they want. They don't find what they don't want. So for example, the scenario, if you're looking for a procedure and you have to wade through 5 paragraphs of conceptual before you find step 1, that's a little frustrating. So looking closely at information architect and how we can define the docs there. And working in the repo, I'm very excited to I love Git. I have a love-hate relationship with Git. So getting back into the repo and working with the community and with my colleagues in there is something I'm really looking forward to.
All right. Thank you, Tana. Okay, one last question. We, in our previous conversation before the stream, we briefly touched on your pets, and you said, okay, you could fill an entire stream by talking about them. But maybe you could just quickly enumerate the kind of pet and the name at least, and then we'll let you go.
That's a great idea. Enumerate them. Okay, can I do this? 3 horses, 4 chickens, 3 dogs, 4 cats, and 5 children.
Right. Wow.
Oh, did I just throw in the children? Oops. The last one's off to college, so it's all good.
We'll cut it out. All right. Thank you, Tana. That was really lovely to have you here. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you all very much. I enjoyed it.
Bye-bye, Tana.
Ciao, Tana.
All right, Daniel, I think with that, we are pretty much at the end of the stream. There is one question that I saw that was raised by Ingo Cup that we quickly can address. I don't think we have an immediate answer, but just for people who have these kind of generic questions, how to solve a certain use case with Prisma, the best thing you can do is actually go to GitHub discussions specifically, and raise your questions there. So we have folks that are monitoring the GitHub discussions and the questions that are being raised there specifically. So while Ingo, unfortunately, we can't give you an answer to your question right now, I would encourage you to go to GitHub discussions. I just dropped the link for that in the comments as well. And if you bring up your question there, then hopefully one of our teammates can pick it up and help you with strategies for localization with Prisma. Right, Daniel, anything else that you have to share, or are we ready to wrap up?
We have an exciting conference coming up in November. I'm not sure how much we can share at this point, but we're going to be talking about databases and serverless. And so we're going to have some really, really interesting speakers from, I believe, MongoDB, Netlify, PlanetScale, Cloudflare. So it's going to be really, really exciting. And we'll be sharing more in the near future. So stay tuned and be sure to join us if you are around. It's going to happen in November.
Yes. The website for that will be up soon. And of course, in the meantime, you can go ahead and go to cloud.prisma.io to check out the Prisma data platform that we also briefly saw today in Matt's demo. Of course, a lot of the talks and the topics at our serverless data conference will also be around the Prisma data platform. So definitely keep an eye on that. The website will be launched soon, and everything will be announced on Twitter and the usual channels. So thanks everyone for joining us today again, and see you all in 2 weeks.